Jerry, can you still hear me?
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Jerry Jaffe, the world's most highly educated stand-up comedian, and welcome to today's live stream for the Comical Heathen podcast. I, of course, am your host. I'm the head heathen. I welcome heathens of all stripes, colors, and personalities. We are just here to hang out on a Sunday and have fun. Maybe you went to church, maybe you didn't go to church, but this is what I'm doing on my Sunday. So thanks for joining us. You'll see I have some guests coming in a moment. I'll bring the hilarious comedian from Cleveland, Steve Mers, up on to podcast. And then we have a caller who's going to call in a few minutes. And then we have another guest who's going to log in and join us in about half an hour. So we got a lot going on, a lot of guests, a lot of topics. I went with the topic for this live stream, religion in the news, because I don't know what happened in the past week or so, but it seems like every day there's another headline that would make a moderate and right-thinking heathen's head go like that. And, I could pull the ripcord on my own engine and spend an hour ranting about this, but I'd much rather have fun hearing what other people have to say and hanging out with some, fun and intelligent comedians. Here's a couple of announcements I want to get out up at the beginning before I bring on any guests. This podcast originally started a few years ago as a side project meant to support the research for a book I'm writing on satire. And probably the first 25 episodes were me interviewing comedians about satire. And I interviewed all kinds of comedians. It would be boorish of me to list them all, though I certainly was excited to interview Lewis Black. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back and look up my interview with Lewis Black. But I've interviewed many other interesting people, and you can go through the archives and see who they are. But I will mention that the book itself is coming out. Let me show you real quick. We'll see if I can share my screen and do it quickly. There's the one I want to show you. I'm assuming all you people can see this screen right now. And what it says is Religious Satire in the Era of New Atheism by Jerry C. Jaffe. That's me. It is about satire after September 11th, as particularly religious satire, which there was clearly a heightened interest and increase in religious satire after September 11th. And I link it to that exact same era, like the aughts, was the rise of what some people call New Atheism. So I sort of connect all of those dots. It's from Routledge, and you can see it says hardcover, $66.99. No one's going to pay $66.99. Or should I say, please, if you want the hardcover, you can get it for $66.99. But I will say there is a Kindle version available. You can see it here on the share screen for $26, and that's a more reasonable price for a book. So please consider looking into that. That comes out in July with pre-orders in June. All right, so I wanted to mention that. I do have some upcoming shows, particularly at the August. I'll be at the Funny Stop in Cuyahoga Falls. I'll have some posts on Facebook about that when it gets closer. So just keep your eyes and ears peeled. I'm going to say one more topic I particularly wanted to mention, and then I'll bring on our first guest. Steve is patiently waiting in the green room. Thank you, Steve, for your patience. Somewhat ironically, yet seriously, I recently became an ordained minister through what's called the Universal Life Church. That is a real ministry, by the way. Anyone can access their website and pay a fee and become an ordained minister. And you might think, well, why would you do that, Jerry? You're a very talkative atheist and secularist. Why are you now a minister? Well, the Universal Life Church, one of its functions is to provide marriage officiating services for people who are outside of sort of conservative religious boxes. If you're a Catholic or a Jewish person, you'll go to your church or synagogue and get married. But whether you're other people, it could be atheists, could be LG community, it could be other people who just want to do things their own way, don't want to have a religious officiant. However, in the state of Ohio, and I believe all 50 of the U.S. states, a religious officiant, an officiant of a wedding has to be ordained. You cannot just be like a dude. Now, there are some exceptions because, of course, you could go to the courthouse and have a judge do it. I guess if you're on a ship at sea, the captain could do it. But if you're just, Kelly and John, and you want to get married, and then you say to your friend Jerry, hey, we're all atheists. How'd you like to be our officiant? And then you go to a place like the Universal Life Church to get ordained. So I did just officiate John and Kelly's wedding ceremony. I was honored to be a part of it. You'll be glad to know that the part I participated in, which was the actual ceremony, had my sports watch running during the ceremony, 22 minutes. They asked me to speak on the topic of love. I won't repeat the whole thing, but I'm proud of the fact that it was under 5 minutes. I've been to weddings where the minister speaks for 30 or 40 minutes, and you're like, dude, this is not about you. So you should not be center stage right now. Calm down. So I kept it short and sweet. A couple things from the wedding. First of all, John and Kelly are both comedians in the Cleveland area, and other comedians were part of the event. Our friend John Armstrong was one of the groomsmen, and Steve Mers was the videographer, and a couple other comedians were involved too. I apologize if there's anyone I didn't name. We all were put at one table, maybe to keep us from causing trouble with other people. So I was hanging out with John and Steve and some other people all night. It was a great time. We talked about whatever, X, Y, and Z. And I looked at John and I looked at Steve and I said, you should come on my podcast and we can talk about this stuff together. So I put together this live stream. That's part of the motivation. That's why I'm boring you with me being a minister. I am available to officiate your offbeat wedding, though. So hit me up at comicalheathen.com and I will officiate your wedding. I put a post up about becoming an ordained minister and officiating a wedding. And a lot of people put nice things. Some people, most of my Facebook friends know I'm not religious. So they just said, oh, that's cool, or that's funny, or they made a little joke, or they probably got like 100 likes, which I guess is not bad for an old guy. One person did jump in, a particularly religious-minded friend of mine, but who schooled me for mocking religion. And since that person's not here to defend themselves, I'm not going to throw any hardballs their way. But, other people chimed in too, or like, what the hell are you talking about? It was, a beautiful wedding among friends. Nobody at the wedding was mocking religion. In fact, it's the state's fault for requiring religious people to do this service. So whose fault is it really? So at any rate, that's what it's all about, people. So I'm going to bring in our first guest. He's patiently waiting. I've known him for many years. I wouldn't be exaggerating to say he's one of my favorite comedians in Cleveland. He may not remember this, but once at an open mic, he had his notebook out, and it was just a rowdy bar, and people were just screwing around anyway. And Steve threw his notebook at the audience, and I just thought that was such an apt metaphor for Steve, throwing his jokes at the audience. Wonder if he remembers that. Anyway, let me bring him into the studio, making part of the live stream, my good friend, Steve Mers.
Hello. Can you hear me this time?
Steve, I still can't hear you. Steve was having some technical difficulties with his microphone.
Well, it says that...
First of all, just to be clear, you can hear me, right? Okay. Excellent. So I don't know what's going on with your mic, Steve. Do you want to swap mics out, or...
It's working.
Reboot your computer?
No, it's working. You
the link. I know you reviewed the link once.
It's you.
I know.
Because it works on...
Yeah, there's nothing on mine. Mine says your microphone is on. In fact, I just muted it so I can unmute it to be sure. I'll check the mic settings on my end. Yep, your mic volume is up on my end. Okay. I will say, while we think about this for a second, what I've been doing lately for my podcast is doing live streams and then also editing them and releasing them as podcast episodes. So only people participating in the live stream will get all of this action, Steve. When we fix this technical glitch-orama,
testing,
we'll just smoothly go into our conversation. But for people watching the live stream now,
testing.
Steve's trying stuff.
It says it's working.
Still no audio. It's really weird, Steve. I don't know what's going on, my friend. It's just it's almost as if your mic was muted, which I know it's not, but that's just no sound is being registered whatsoever.
Testing. Yeah, mic's working. It says it's working on the app.
I'm not sure how we want to proceed, Steve. Steve is a talented photographer and videographer, so he knows his equipment better than I know mine, I'm sure.
I don't know what to do.
I'm not sure what is going on.
I don't know what else to do.
Because I'm a doofus, that's why I said, can you reboot it? That's the only move I've got. Plug and unplug, boot and reboot. Okay, yeah, I got a text from Steve saying that it's working on his end. So is it possibly something on my end? Yeah, I'm going to review some settings on my end while he comes back on, and we'll see. And yes, it may have been something on my end. I did change a couple of settings. Another friend of mine who's going to call in also just texted me saying he could hear Steve as well. So that does make it seem like it's something on my end. I bet the thing that I just fixed on my end, as I predicted that it was something on my end, by the way. So I think I fixed it. Yep. Yeah, Steve is a professional videographer and filmmaker and has much better equipment than myself. Yeah, I predict it will work fine when he comes back and we'll all make fun of me. I am definitely the doofus in this situation. And all these awkward pauses will be edited out of the podcast version of this live stream. So there's a couple of people watching. Thank you, people who are watching. And I'm sure Steve will reboot on the link, and when he comes back, everything will work. While he's doing that, I'll tell you another thing I've been thinking about. I was thinking about things I was going to say at John and Kelly's wedding. And one of the topics was, have you ever heard, sometimes attributed to Carl Sagan, I've heard it attributed to others as well, the idea that doing science is like the universe thinking about itself. Like human consciousness is the universe having consciousness. Like we are part of the universe. And so our doing science, our thinking, our writing poetry, our looking up at the stars with wonder and awe is the universe doing that. You know, we think of the universe as like black holes and distant galaxies, but indeed, it's yep. Yep. Steve is texting me right now. But if that's true, then doesn't that mean that everything else we do is also the universe doing it to itself? Like if you're masturbating, isn't that the universe jerking off? If you're a doofus trying to run a podcast and you can't get the sound right, isn't that the universe fucking up a podcast about which we are talking about the universe? I brought this up at a show recently and I asked people what they did for work so I could like riff on it. And one guy was a butcher, actually. I'm not making this up. And I said, oh, you do retail. That retail is the universe selling useless things to the universe. Things are being a butcher is the universe killing the universe so other parts of the universe can eat the universe. I'm going to bring Steve back and I predict that my fuck up has been fixed.
Has it been?
Yes, hallelujah.
What did you do?
I'd be too embarrassed to say. I just have, there's a lot of different ways to put your computer on mute.
Oh, okay.
So just one of the like hidden ways
gotcha.
It was on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say everything was working.
Yeah.
It lets you test, so I knew that my end was fine.
And
okay.
Our friend Dave is in the green room, and he was texting me too that he could hear you. So
yeah, we're good. I'm just glad we got it fixed.
Yes, yes.
That now, was Jesus. Course, Jesus was doing that.
Yes. Well, I saw a billboard that said, "No one loves you like Jesus does," and I said, "No one loves me like a 2,000-year-old corpse."
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Oh my gosh.
Steve, how are you?
Good. I mean, that's my superficial answer, but my real answer is just I have been worried about, politics lately. It's not good. I think do I watch too much news? I'm like gaslighting myself where I'm like, am I just crazy? Am I losing my mind?
Well, I know going into the Hillary Trump election, I was going to the Nate Silver website every day because it was predicting Hillary would win. And it was like making me calm down.
Yeah.
So
we did survive the first, but it's all just slightly, everything's just being torn away slowly. And
I
I
just
hope it's not quick. I don't know. It's just
it's a slow but steady. I mean, Newt Gingrich made local issues national. That was like his contract on America. So my saying is that Newt Gingrich killed the Congress, and Mitch McConnell's been fucking its corpse ever since.
Yeah.
And now and then Trump is on a whole nother level of, disturbing. Is there anything in particular in the news, like one thing standing out of the past couple of days that just like scares you or bugs you?
Project 2025 in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to have rights.
Yes.
I like having rights and freedoms and things like that. I'm becoming more of a patriot, like constitutionalist in a lot of ways.
Isn't it weird? I know, right?
It's so ironic. I'm way more of a patriot than any of these assholes are. It's pathetic. How they're just, I don't know. What's sad is I don't believe in free will either. So it's like, whose fault is it? No one's. We're all just being thrown through this meat grinder, and I don't like it. So
yes.
Ugh.
Well, that's it. It's what they call free will's a useful illusion. Like, you have to at least pretend to participate.
Right. Do you ever wonder how the fact that you learned that there's no free will has affected your trajectory, so to speak? It's like it's so ironic and very confusing to think about. It's like a Back to the Future sequel. You're like, it just becomes like a.
Yeah, so I was in college and I was explaining to a friend of mine why I didn't believe in free will, and I said, imagine that little like a explosion, a little bomb, just a little bomb that throws dirt, and 2 specks of dirt have now been thrown by this little explosion, and the one speck of dirt says to the other one, "I believe in free will." Like, we're just specks of dirt that have been flown through the universe by a big explosion.
Yeah. Yep.
But for me, this might be either the artist or the weirdo or the nihilist in me, I found it empowering. Like, it's almost like a superpower.
Yeah.
Like, the lack of free will means you can do whatever you want.
It's freeing. I still have a set of principles I'd like to think I have control over. I think, but at the end of the day, you just conclude that you're lucky that you know these things, and that's your trajectory, because it is all cause and effect.
And that's why in my daily life, even though I'm happy to make fun of religion and politics and hypocrites, I'm not too concerned about the people around me. They're just their own specks of dirt, which I am too. So I'm just saying they're on the same level as me. I'm on the same level as them. And if they have different trajectories. Now, when we have, a Trump or a mega asshole, I'm going to call them out. But I'm not being mean-spirited to my neighbor,
Yeah.
So
it's just, it's
did you have a chance? I did have one of our 12 regular listeners texted me with a topic that he wanted us to discuss.
Sure.
And so I posted about it yesterday, the 7 mountain mandate.
Oh.
Encountered this before?
No. 7 mountain mandate. Although I did briefly, I remember when you mentioned that, I did look over it for a second. So I feel like I know. Go ahead and give me a brief rundown.
Yeah, I'll just say, here's what the introduction to Wikipedia says. The 7 mountain mandate is a dominionist conservative Christian movement of Pentecostals and evangelicals, Christians. It holds that there are 7 aspects of society that believers seek to influence: family, religion, education, media, arts, entertainment, business, and government. And it is like considered, I've looked up a couple of different quick theology websites. It is considered like Christian theocracy.
Yeah.
And its position is the irony of like the American Christians who feel like they're losing their rights. Right? Like if the Supreme Court says, the Constitution says, there shouldn't be religion in school. No praying in school, so to speak. I'm just being casual right now. They take that's like the group that takes that as an affront. Like, you're taking away our power. So we got to get our power back.
Yeah, they like power. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it is. It's very theocratic. There are some members of Congress right now who subscribe to this. I mean, explicitly, 7 Mountain Mandate. And during his presidential reign, Trump's leading spiritual advisor was a 7 Mountain Mandate-er. So it's definitely like a power grab, and political and theocratic.
Yeah.
And 2 of the news stories I saw one of which I posted online, were not about 7 Mountain Mandate, but were about like American Christian theocracy.
Yeah.
So if you want to dive into a couple of these stories, again, a friend of mine, who I was talking to earlier today, I was saying, hey, you want to call in and ask us a question? And he's like, well, I read all the articles you posted. What am I supposed to ask you? And I said, me and Steve and John are not journalists or, theologians. We're here to just riff and screw around. So
yeah,
that's our goal here. Steve, John, anyone else, the 12 people listening at home, my 12 regular, we're just here. Like, imagine that you're in a green room before a show at a comedy club. This is what we might be talking about.
All right. Yeah.
So one of the articles was that in Louisiana, they've just made it legal to put the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms.
Yeah.
That's total Christian theocracy, in my opinion. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just putting this up here.
Please do.
I did read both of these just before we went on.
The
skipping the leaving class for.
That's the other. That is the other one. So
we're talking about Alito then, right?
And Alito was another religion in the news topic. So that's something we're going to talk about.
Okay.
But the first topic I wanted us to riff on for a minute was that I actually printed them off.
That's why I was like, wait, which one? I thought it was just the 2 there. So
Louisiana requires all public classrooms.
I'm familiar.
To display the 10 Commandments. This was just June 19th, 2024. I mean, talk about, frankly, fucking going backwards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Steve, I don't think so. Do you have kids?
No. Why would I want to hurl an innocent soul into this barren hellscape?
Yeah, project another speck of dirt across the universe.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
But
yeah. So, do you have any immediate gut reactions to this 10 Commandments in the classrooms in Louisiana? Theocratic. I mean, go ahead.
Just like anything else, I just despise it. It's ironic that Donald Trump embodies basically all of them.
He's broken every single one of them throughout his life.
I mean, I find that ironic, and then or whatever. I never know what ironic means anymore.
Correct. The word irony has been so deconstructed.
I'm like, what is it? Socratic irony? Like, I'm like, I don't remember what
Shakespearean irony, dramatic irony.
Yeah, I understand relativity better than I understand irony, which is so weird. Maybe that's ironic. I don't know. Well, I'll figure it out.
Well, one of our great philosophers of the modern age is Bender on Futurama. And on an episode of Futurama, while he's singing, he defines irony as the use of words in other than their intended meaning.
Yeah.
And so when the 7 Mountain Mandate or other Christian theocrats say they're worried about freedom because their freedom is being impinged upon, that's ironic because they don't give a fuck about our freedom.
No, yeah. I just, I have violent thoughts when I think about how my rights being taken away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say violent, I mean like defending my life, like that kind of stuff. But this is me catastrophizing to the worst case scenario down the line to its bitter end. But sadly, that's what fascism does to the mind.
Yeah.
It's terrorism. That's what I feel like. We're being terrorized.
Yes.
I want people to be able to exercise their religion freely as long as it doesn't interfere with anyone else. So I'm not in that boat, despite my atheism.
Yeah.
It's because that would be
I compare it. I compare it to smoking. I don't give a fuck if people smoke at home,
right?
But I don't need the secondhand smoke blown in my face.
Yeah.
And I don't, same thing. People's personal religion, I don't care until they blow it in my face.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of this is what we're doing without a lot of we're sure that this is true.
Right.
That's the pinnacle of the silliness of it to me, is just they're not going to worry about if they're right. Well, you get it. I'm not going to get into all this, but
I have another irony for you about the 7 Mountain Mandate, because
sure.
So I got a message from one of our 12 regular listeners, Corey, out in California, asking if we would discuss this topic. And so I found a theology website. It's like a blog, and a actual pastor from Idaho wrote a critique of the 7 Mountain Mandate. I can put a link to it in the podcast version of this episode, but the gist of it is he just went through and destroyed all of their biblical notions. Like, he's saying, this is not what the Bible says. You misunderstand this part of the Bible. And what I think is ironic about that is the Bible means what you think it means. Like, he's not any more right than the 7 Mountain Mandators are.
Yeah.
You know?
You mean like fundamentalism? Like,
yeah,
that kind of level? Yeah.
You know, this gentleman, I just know his bio from this blog. I don't know him personally. I mean, he's a minister in a church in Idaho, so he's ostensibly religious, and he's writing a theology blog. But I like his interpretation of the Bible, which might be more, I don't know, correct in some historical sense or whatever. But the point is, I love it when two different religious people, like a Methodist and a Catholic, or a Jew or Muslim, debate theology.
Yeah.
Because it's like arguing about what unicorns look like.
Right. Like, it's arguing a fan fiction universe.
Yes, it's fan fiction.
Like, no, the articles were not mandated until the 6th seal was broken in the era of Nymph.
Yeah.
And it's like, it sounds like an elven universe of fantasy, and it's so stupid.
Right?
Oh my God. All right.
Yeah. And yet that's where the theocracy comes. It's stupid until they blow it in our face.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
My thing is, like, don't force me to go to church. Don't force me to do anything.
Right.
I mean, beyond that, though, it's still scary. I mean, beyond the physical coercion.
You might know this already, but can I tell you some funny Ten Commandment history?
Sure.
During the 20th century, there has been a kind of consistent push to put like the 10 Commandments on display in courthouses.
Yeah.
But you know who is behind that? Film producer Cecil B. DeMille, when he made his 10 Commandments movie, started funding local groups to put the 10 Commandments up as a publicity stunt.
And then it spiraled into what it is now.
So now when I see this Louisiana ruling, like on Facebook, I enigmatically put Cecil B. DeMille wins again.
Yeah. Well, hey, but what is religion but a piece of fiction that gets spiraled into a false reality, right?
Yeah, PR.
So it's tracking very well with the religious in its nature. That is hilarious, though, by the way. I find that ironic. It's kind of like with the Pledge of Allegiance. That was only mandated, in the 50s or so? Somewhere around there?
Yes, they added under God.
Oh, right.
During the Cold War.
Yeah.
And also, none of our founding fathers did the Pledge of Allegiance, nor would have they.
No. It's very weird.
I'll tell you another quick fun fact. This is me being a professor, so I apologize. And then I'm going to bring in our caller and see what his question is.
Sure.
But sorry, my brain froze for a second. Here's a bar bet that you can win. You know, so a bar bet is like a bet that the other person can't win.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a good edition of the Bible, like a King James second edition. Like, it's got to be like a scholarly good. But if you have a good edition of the Bible, bet somebody that they cannot name the 10 Commandments. And no matter what they say, they'll be wrong, because there are no 10 Commandments in the Bible.
Mm.
Moses goes up the mountain, talks to the burning bush, talk about fan fiction and science fiction and whatever.
Yeah.
And then he comes back with the laws of God. They are not enumerated. Here's the first, here's the second, here's the third. It's just the laws of God.
Mm.
Sunday school teachers, a couple 100 years ago, I don't have an exact date, just started calling them the 10 Commandments so children could memorize them. They're not actually the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament. That's a Sunday school thing.
Yeah.
So no matter what a person writes down for what they think the 10 Commandments are, they're going to be wrong.
Yeah, wow. That's revisionism for you, just constantly fitting an agenda retrospectively or whatever. So
I was once teaching something about the Old Testament, and I had a student, they raised their hand, and so they get a gold star for participating, but they wanted to say that the Bible they used at home said different shit in it. It was like a different translation that was more Christian-y and more with what he was taught. So that's speaking of revisionism.
Yeah.
All right. I have a friend. He's based in Ohio. He's one of our 12 regular listeners. And when he saw we were going to be talking about religion in the news, he volunteered to call in with a comment and a question. So I'm going to bring my good friend David into the studio. He's on audio only because he's calling in. And we'll see what he wants to talk about. Okay, Steve, and our 12 listeners at home?
Sounds good.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, Gabe, welcome to the stream. How the hell are you?
I'm doing all right. I was thinking about the articles, and I can't help, halfway through because it's so common for them to do so, halfway through the children who leave class to go study the Bible, I just couldn't help but think, if you open the door for one, you got to open them for all. And they're not going to like that, and then here comes the Satanic Temple to be right at the end of the article. They went ahead and mentioned it, and I was like, there they are. But it makes me wonder, with the 10 Commandments being posted, I wonder if the Satanic Temple will get on top of that. I mean, it's fairly recent, but
it's in their wheelhouse
everywhere.
Yeah, it's totally the kind of thing they would get involved in.
Yeah.
So here's hoping. I mean, it's hard to count religions because it depends what you count.
Absolutely.
Anthropologists estimate there's between 3,000 and 10,000 religions on Earth right now.
That's crazy.
So what do they want? Every single religion should storm the Louisiana State House and demand that their version of the 10 Commandments be put up. And it'll be like wallpaper with hundreds of different religious, worldviews or laws printed.
I think honestly it's going to take a lot of them are very xenophobic and racist and such. It's going to take one group that doesn't see things just like them, and they're going to be like, oh, that's not what we meant.
Well, the difference now is, and I think this is not an accident, both of these stories being in the news as current events.
Yeah.
Is the current Supreme Court will affirm this shit.
Oh, probably, given their right-wing siding.
Yes. The right-wing siding, and several of them are, maybe not all the conservatives, but Alito and others are in the theocratic camp.
Yeah.
So that's why on the state level, they're doing these things. They're daring, secularists or the Satanists
to countersue and everything.
Yeah, so that it goes through the court system, because the current Supreme Court will say, yeah, you can do that with some bullshit interpretation. It's funny that the conservative judges basically are literalists, just like the biblical literalists.
It is crazy.
Neither of them are actually literalists. If you took the Bible literally, there are no dinosaurs in the Bible. Right. So why are the literalists obsessed with dinosaurs? And there's nothing in the Second Amendment about owning machine guns if you took it literally. So they're very bad literalists. They're very selective literalists.
Well, it's like you said, they want to take the Bible for whatever sides with what views they have, and just interpret it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm getting a text from our other guest. Let me just text him back real quick.
Yeah, the thing with these Satanists is it's funny how they don't understand the the religious groups don't understand that Satanism is a purely trolling, you know. And why if you don't believe in the supernatural, why do you believe in Satan? I don't know, because I have a middle school level understanding of satire and sarcasm. Like, you can't even pick up on these little things, but you think you're some sort of book. You know, you like to analyze the Bible. You certainly don't have you. I can't read Shakespeare, but I can read the Bible, and I understand, you know, the context of humor in all of this satanic panic stuff. Oh, it's so silly.
Yes, well, I mean, I want the alignment chart from Dungeons and Dragons to be put in every school.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me.
Yes, Dave?
The one article said that they're getting credit for leaving classes to study the Bible, and near the end, somebody actually got quoted, like a parent, saying that she just thinks it should be fair, since comparable to some students that can do secular things after school, like Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Does that mean kids can be allowed to leave the classroom to do secular things as well as Dungeons and Dragons and get school credit for it? Because I think that should be the case.
Yeah.
Steve, do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
I have before. Oh no, I've sat in on Dungeon with Eric Cribley, Mandy Lee, and Dan Handelman, and a few other friends.
Sure. Some of my favorite people.
A lot of sorcery was happening. We were all, it was a seance. We summoned some demons. We're all possessed now, and we're out to get everyone.
Excellent.
So,
well, then, I mean, I got to get all of you on the Comical Heathen then. I need more demons.
It's just, I can't help but mock everything. It's just, that's what it is at this point.
Yes. Well, that's the person who commented, the one sort of negative thread for my comment about joining the Universal Life Church as a minister. The person commenting is ostensibly a comedian. This is what confuses me the most. Even if they're a Christian, even if they're religious, even if they find what I do offensive, don't they know we're comedians? Like, they should at least know, oh, I dislike Jerry. I don't like all his mocking of religion, but it's comedy. Like, they should know at least that much if they call themselves a comedian.
Yeah. And Jerry, you're doing the Lord's work. You are mocking religion. You are literally doing good because we are familiar enough with the topic. I've been like this since I was 13. Like, and I've tested this over and over. All it does is get strong. All it does is recede into the stronger region, you know. It's like that's telling, you know.
Well, I won't say that I remember it or I've memorized it, but I will say I can say something that most of these theocratic people cannot say, which is I have read the Bible twice from end to end. Now, it's pretty long and boring, and most of it's bullshit, so I didn't memorize it or take it too seriously.
Right.
But you think that would be the first thing you would do, you know, if you're an adult calling yourself a Christian, like,
yeah.
At least if you're going to blow your religious smoke in people's face.
Right. I don't want to see your IKEA couch if you didn't read the instructions. So.
Yeah. David, you want to make any more comments before we kick you out? Comments or questions?
No, I'm just enjoying listening to the show.
Well, thank you for being one of our 12
continue to do so.
Well, feel free to join the chat or something if you want to add any more comments. Otherwise, me and Steve will find other things to mock for the next few minutes.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
you see
David.
That's God seeking his wrath upon that whatever city that is. It's lightning. I just figured I'd be like, look at the artwork. Yes. It's Zeus, actually. I'm a Zeus advocate.
You know, absolutely. We got to get Zeus's laws into every classroom in Louisiana.
Right. If we're a democracy, we might as well see through all the Greek principles, right?
Yes. So. Yep. I mean, each Greek god had their own temple, so it's like 20 religions right there, minimum.
The Pantheon.
Pantheons are a lot more fun.
They are.
Well, as a theater kid, I love Dionysus. You know,
nice.
That god, he's the god of theater, of course. but he's also the god of wine and sexuality, which are
Well,
two very important components in the world of theater.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's so funny.
Hey, the Greeks figured some shit out. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I would just like kids to be able to leave their classrooms to go and study science. How about that? Can that be a thing?
That would be amazing.
Take an hour out of their day every day to leave school to go somewhere else where they actually learn about science.
Yeah. Jerry, I think the real crux of the problem here is, why don't we all just be nice to each other?
Right.
Like, is that so hard? Like,
Right.
can we just get to the core of like what makes people feel good and have a good life? And that is keeping people happy and being good.
Right.
But none of that seems to align with this. It's so silly to me. It's all just doom and gloom and apocalyptic bullshit.
It's June, so it's Pride Month, and I'm happy to officiate any Pride weddings who need an officiant. But additionally, there's been a lot of like gay bashing, on Twitter and social media, and so those, it's exact example of what you're talking about. Why isn't their reaction to their gay family members or neighbors one of love, or even kind indifference? Like, it's none of your business.
Right.
Why do you gotta get angry about it? And then, twist a couple of Bible verses that they think is about being anti-gay.
Yeah. What about personal liberty? Beyond the scientific validity of homosexuality, even if it was a choice, it comes down to personal liberty and leaving people the fuck alone. That's how I feel.
And leaving how they fuck alone as well.
Exactly. Why is it your business so vehemently? That's kind of ironic in itself.
Steve, I'm gonna take a quick commercial break. If people have been paying attention, I've been sipping water out of this.
Holy water.
It's been blessed by a minister of the Universal Life Church and the Comical Heathen podcast. If you too want a fancy mug like this, I do have a merch shop, and I'm going to put the merch shop up right now just for people who may or may not care. Here we go. There you go.
It's a great mug.
Thank you. I use Spreadshop, and what's great about that is once you have your images uploaded, people can kind of order whatever they want. Like if you want a coffee mug, I like the black on white because it's very heatheny. But you can make it any color you want. Just buy one, and be sure you buy a copy of my book. Comes pre-order in June, comes out in July. I've been editing the fuck out of that book for the past month. I dream of letters now, like misspelled words. But at any rate, Steve, in your comedy, do you have any bits on religion that you like to do currently? Anything? Yeah.
Let's see. I know I have, but it's in recent years I have been working on being more palatable to general audiences, because I am known to turn people off, but I'm also I really mean what I say, and I really do feel the way that I feel when I say things. So I mean that lends itself to the validity of it to me.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I can't think of any. Right. Oh, well, a lot of politics with religion.
Sure.
Like I talk about how I like to go up to the people picketing outside of Planned Parenthood and act like I think that they're just workers there protesting to unionize. And I'm like, yeah, you guys should get paid more, just to make them mad.
Yes.
And about how sperm banks are the opposite of Planned Parenthood. And I can keep going, but yeah, that's generally the gist of it.
Sure. That's excellent. Yeah. I mean, let's just say like Bill Maher or Lewis Black, they come with a built-in audience. 90% of the people in their audience are there to hear them rant about politics or religion or whatever's, on their mind that day. Whereas you and I, when we do a show, we're kind of taking a chance to get edgy or to do religion or politics.
Right.
Because we're also trying to get paid $50 to be a feature at a small comedy club or something. So actually, a person I interviewed out of LA is called Ian Harris, and he's got a special out that's worth watching called Critical and Thinking. But I talked to him about it, and he's a headliner, and he said like the first half of his set, he lets the audience get to know him.
Yeah.
So I do wife jokes and job jokes and my hobbies, and then I tiptoe into topics based on how much they like me.
Yeah.
So, hey, our other guest has now joined us, so I'm going to bring him into the stream. He was a groomsman at the Kelly and John wedding, and also a local comedian that we all love. Welcome to the stream, John Armstrong.
What's up, gentlemen?
John, how the hell are you?
I'm well. How y'all doing?
Good.
We're okay. We're okay. Do you have any religious jokes or religious satire you're doing on stage currently?
Ish. Yesterday I did this thing. It wasn't really a religious thing. It was more a misdirect. I was alluding that I was going to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and I just the lead up was, I want to say something really quick. I know people don't like talking about politics on stage. And it's been a lot of tension and going on right now. And people feel like if you speak out, you're being anti-Semitic. But I really feel like I have to say something about this. And then I just start talking about how Kendrick Lamar has been shitting on Drake for the past few months. So I lead it into a misdirect of that. But I did have a joke I was doing before about Israel, Palestine. Again, not about the religious aspect, but more the Zionist colonizing aspect of it.
Well, I had last fall a plan to do a monthly podcast for 4 months, and each episode was going to be about conspiracy theories. So the first one was just like introduction to what is a conspiracy theory, and the second one was conspiracy theories that are anti-science. The third one I had planned was anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And that is when the Hamas attack took place, was the same month I was going to do that episode. And I had guests lined up already. And we all got into a little chat and said, there's no way we're doing this podcast. Like we all agreed, like that even though our sentiments would be largely like, kindness towards Jewish people, of which I am one. But the whole topic was so explosive that nobody wanted to. No one felt it was appropriate to even get within a mile of it.
Right.
So I never did episodes 3 or 4 of my conspiracy theory series.
Well, that's one of the things why I have been trying to push forward and talk about it here and there, because I think it's the closest thing I can relate to it as far as trying to be critical of Zionism without being anti-Semitic. It's kind of like when with black people, how you get into respectability politics, and you can address things that are going on like in the black community as far as high crime rates and out of wedlock births and things like that. And that can be true, but you can also talk about it from these black people are degenerate standpoint. So a lot of black people try to avoid those, and white people too, who would call themselves allies, try to avoid those conversations because you don't want to feed any fuel to these people who would use that just as see these, even they're saying that they're, you know what I mean? But the thing that I have learned is you just gotta, those people are gonna be there anyway. You know what I mean? Like those people are always gonna be there to try to jump on it and try to be like, see, this whole thing we were saying, this ain't a conspiracy, it's true. These blacks are in jail more than it is. And it's like you can. So I try to not be so scared, because those people are going to be there in the shadows waiting to kind of weaponize the conversation anyway. You just got to have objective facts to say, even though this is true, that doesn't mean that on a genetic level that makes these people degenerates. You know what I mean?
No, and there's a history of that. I mean, when there was phrenology where people would like study heads for about moral character.
Yeah.
Those people said, oh, well, the African skull is smaller. It's got more deficiencies on it. And there were actually museums in London that had like the history of mankind with skulls. And of course, like white man's skull was at the end because that's the highest form of evolution. And the black man's skull was down with apes.
Oh, yeah. Dude, they had human zoos, man. They had black people in zoos.
Since you brought it up, and of course, I want to be as much an ally as I can without being an asshole. the topic of Christian values being imposed into public schools. I mean, what's your opinion? And is there a Black community opinion of this type of religious topic?
Well, I speak for all Black people.
Of course, that's why I invited you on.
You know what? The thing,
of course, give us your perspective.
The thing in like Black American culture is the church has always kind of been our conduit to not only like come together in fellowship, but also to address politics. So that's again how like there is a separation of church and state, but for Black people, the church was the only place where we could kind of organize, which is why those lines did get like kind of blurred. You know what I mean? So you do have that. But as far as like this thing with the 10 Commandments and schools and stuff like that, you have this old school kind of tradition with Black people where it's like, yeah, you know, bringing spanking back in school, and I don't see what's wrong with that, and we do need God. There, you will have that, but overall, I think there's a pragmatism in Blackness to where even though we know the church has been kind of a backbone for us, we know that it was more so because it helps in our trying to achieve some type of freedoms and equal rights and things like that. And it's not as like to the bone of the actual dogmaticness of the text, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like we get into religion, but it was kind of a means to an end for freedom. It's not like a word for word evangelical. Now, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of religious like Black people who do that, but we're not as tied to that thought of, hey, if we put the 10 Commandments here, and hey, if we hung up Jesus there, you know what I mean? I think, and honestly, the white evangelicals that do that, I don't even think they believe it so much more as it's used as a dominance thing, and they just try to use that as a moral compass. I want to control you, and I want to live in a dictatorship, but since this is coming from Jesus, it has a morality to it. You know what I mean?
I know 2 or 3 people who went to like seminary schools and then dropped out because going to seminary made them atheists. Like kind of being forced to study the Bible seriously.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you a question. I don't mean to change the subject, but one of our listeners is a friend of mine, Corey, in Michigan. And I'm going to bring up Corey's comment. She just texted me a comment. And again, as everyone knows, we're 3 comedians. So please construe this as like green room goofing around. We're not Harvard trained historians, as far as I know.
Speak for yourselves. No.
I apologize. But here, Corey's asking about, in relation to the 10 Commandments, I'm paraphrasing a little bit because it was kind of a long text, but the gist of it was about the founding fathers. And most of them were religious and Christians. And so to what degree were they founding a Christian nation? Now, this comes up in classes I teach at the college where I teach, but you don't want my professorial answer. I want your sarcastic answers. Really, what are your thoughts, Steve and John, about the idea that the founding fathers were Christians who were founding a Christian country?
I'll go first real quick. Well, apparently not. They didn't want us to be a theocracy because they could have easily just installed one. And I think a lot of, you know, the Pilgrims came over of a religious freedom or something. And they wanted to, but they, I think, were crazier than the people. Weren't they like kind of like? Well, they were. Remember.
They were the religious nuts of England,
right?
Yeah, they were so wacky. They kind of got more kicked out than came here.
I think a British comedian, if I think of his name, I'll give him credit in a second. But he had a great joke where he goes, "You Americans call it Thanksgiving. In England, we call it fuck off Pilgrim's Day."
Was that Eddie Izzard that did that?
No, but I love Eddie Izzard. That's she's one of my favorite comedians. But anyway, I'll think of his name in a second.
But yeah, the Constitution clearly is an indicator of their secularism. I feel like. And
why do you say that?
It just, give me an example. I mean, just look at our history. We're not. It's been pretty bad. I mean, it's been pretty Christian, but it's never been to the point of like a full-on authoritarian religious thing, and it's only receded since then. You could argue that it was at one point, like, it's strong, but there was nothing in place to really enforce anything from a constitutional standpoint. So I feel like,
if you want to say that the founding fathers were committed to the 10 Commandments, they could have written the 10 Commandments into the Constitution.
Right.
What do you think, John?
Well, I agree. And again, I think that Christianity for them was more of a cultural unifying thing for Europeans. You know what I mean? More than it was, and to have some type of morality. You know what I mean? But like you guys said, if they really wanted that, they could have codified it in the law, because God knows, the stuff that they wanted. Only white land-owning males could own property. So the things that they really cared about, right? The things that they really care about, they wrote it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think again, the religion was kind of used to have some type of morality around the shit that they, in the back of their mind, was messed up. That knew was messed up. Because people, that's the other thing people say. It's like, oh, it was a different time and blah blah blah. But they knew when they were being wrong with certain things, and when they were, you know what I mean? So it's like, if we have God in this, then that gives it some legitimacy. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the reasons that it was brought along. And again, just a cultural thing, because again, I see people who are Jewish who are more culturally Jewish than religious.
You're looking at one right now.
yeah. With black people in the black church, like I said, black church was a place for us to fellowship. There's a lot of us that we believe in God, but again, these institutions become more of a place for people to come together more than people actually believe in that. Again, that dogmatic, thought pattern. So I think it was just a way to have some type of structure to bring people together, and then to kind of gloss over the clearly immoral shit that they were doing. Because that's the other thing too. When people talk about this country being founded and it was about freedom, it wasn't about that. It was about like the freedom to not be under the British Empire. So now we can do our own exploiting here. But it wasn't about this whole like, hey, we're all friends, and that's it. And even if you ignore the which you can't, but people do. If you ignore the genocide of the Native Americans and then slavery of Africans, even if you ignore that, this country started off as a corporation. I mean, it was all, let's not tax. How much land can I own? How much can I just accumulate? And this was like the land of milk and honey. You literally, people forget, like, by the time this country got going, like in the colonies in the 1600s, I mean, the Spaniards had already been here. And when they kind of came through, that's when the first waves of disease came. That's why when the British came over and they saw the state of Native Americans, it was even easier to dominate them. It was like, these weren't stupid people. They had been dealing with almost 150 years of pandemic. You know what I mean? I mean, can you imagine? Like it was like they got down to like 1 out of 10 numbers. You know what I mean? Like, so they had been decimated in population.
Earlier, before you got here, John, I gave Steve a good barroom bet. If you're looking to make some money off your drunk friends, I got another good one for you that just goes along with this topic. In the U.S. Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, that's the first 10 amendments, how many times is God mentioned by name? Like God, Jesus, Lord, anything that would be directly God by name. How many times?
I honestly can say I don't know, but I'm going to guess less than 3, if not 0.
What do you think, Steve?
I honestly don't know. You kind of caught me by surprise. I'm like, that's a thing? All right. Well, I don't know. Yeah,
I mean,
I would have to agree with John.
Nation, so you would think, just like the 10 Commandments comment, they could have wrote the word God or Lord, Jesus into the Constitution, but they didn't ever. But at the end of the Constitution, it was signed, and at the end of the signature, it says, "In the year of our Lord." That's the only time that God is mentioned by name is in the signatures. Where
was that a normal thing to do back then to say in the year of our Lord? Well, I guess you could say that that would have been inevitable and not necessarily part of not part of the literature of the
it's not a theological statement.
Right. Again, it's more of a cultural thing because we count time as from when Jesus was born, but that don't mean everybody who says it's at the year 2024 is a Christian. Ain't it true that like even that in God we trust on money that got put on there in the 40s or 50s? Like that's relatively new.
I mean, we'd have to fact check that, but basically, yes.
Yeah.
During the Cold War, the communists were known for being atheist, and so Cold War politicians, to distinguish America from the communist atheists, started leaning into making America the Christian nation that could defeat the atheist communists. Yeah. And so all kinds of creep, like under God and in God we trust, got seeped into our culture that was not like part of the founding fathers or the Constitution. I think religion is only mentioned twice in the Constitution. During one of the articles, which I don't have in front of me, it basically says that there's no religious test for running for office. So that is separating religion from running from office. And then in the Bill of Rights is the separation clause, where it's, separating the government from religion. So the only two times religion is mentioned is to explicitly separate it from the government running the business of the government.
One of the other things too that was going on in the 1700s is and this can tie into some conspiracy shit.
I know what's coming now.
But it's not. But the original Illuminati, it wasn't this shady cabal. It was the illuminated ones, and it was these people who Europeans had went through the Renaissance, and they were really leaning into science and trying to be more objective and fact-based with as far as going forward. So the founding fathers, a lot of them were really into that. You know what I mean? So I think.
Go ahead. They call that deism. And deism is like Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, I think Madison, but I'm not sure. But a whole group of the founding fathers were like scientifically minded. And they believed in God, so to speak, but it was like the creation of the universe God. Not the old man with the beard. And, Thomas Jefferson wrote a biography of Jesus in which he removed all the miracles. So I have it on my bookshelf over here.
What was his point in doing that? Was he trying to make him more human, or?
Well, I think it was trying to make a more creation. What a deist, as you say in the 1700s. So, if you were to take the parts of Jesus's story, which is about, I don't know, his kindness, his preaching, his as you might have, it sort of just implied his humanity. But not the healing lepers, not the raising from the dead, nothing that would be scientifically unsound.
Right. Yeah, it's more so humanizing them. Yeah. And from my standpoint, it seems like at that time, people were coming out of this kind of not knowing and, snakes and witches and all this, and it was more just scientific stuff that people were going towards. And I think it's kind of an interesting time now that we live in because we have so much knowledge and so much science that people are reverting back to religion because it's a lot of things are scary. And then it's the more we know, the more we don't know. And then we're at a place too to where science doesn't really get used in a scientific way since everything is commodified. We just find ways to we can make something more efficient with this technology, but we're not going to put the money back in people's hands. We're just going to funnel money up to, you know what I mean? So I think there's been a going back to religion because science has stopped kind of benefiting us on an individual basis. If that makes I don't think so completely, but does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Well, Steve was saying earlier that his favorite god is Zeus, and if you think of thousands of years ago, people not knowing where lightning comes from, and go, well, God makes lightning. And so what has happened from then until now is not only do we know more about where lightning comes from, we know significantly more about the natural world. So less of it needs explaining by religion. However, science can't explain everything. So I'm now going to use the phrase religious nuts. So religious nuts cling to what science can't explain.
The God of the gaps.
The God of the gaps. Thank you, Steve. You get a gold star. You're a good student. It's all about the
there's
God
a lot of
which is a dangerous
Dunning-Kruger in
theology because science continues to grow what we know, so the gap gets smaller.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a lot of that Dunning-Kruger in that the more you know, the more you don't know.
Well,
and
yeah, there's false expertise where you learn a little bit about something and then you think you know a lot about something.
Yeah, master of none.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting. I was just telling somebody yesterday, it'll be interesting to see how the next 5, 10, 20 years pan out. Because, I mean, we as humans have always just been kind of shitty towards each other. But with AI advancing and then like the level of income inequality and then just, I mean, shit, dude, we're in the middle of a heat wave and summer just started. You know what I mean? Like,
and
everything
people have died. How are
What's
people
that?
in America dying from a heat wave? I mean, the heat wave, we know, but it's the income inequality and the health insurance situation. You would think that the richest country in the world could provide at least a minimal amount of safety that people don't die from a heat wave.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too that makes this so insidious is even when they run the numbers, even like when conservatives like the Heritage Foundation will run the numbers and they'll find that if you had universal health care, it'd be substantially cheaper. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You'd have better outcomes. And even this stuff that everybody complains about, even like the right, how they like we all hate homelessness, but you know how they've weaponized homelessness to be these democratic cities and blah blah. This is indicative of wokeness and stuff like this. If you had a better health system, you wouldn't be dealing with the level of homelessness. So all this stuff would really
when I was recent, friends know, you might know if you don't, a couple of years ago I ran for city council here where I live. And we have a local homelessness issue. And I was going around the streets talking to homeless people. And I was talking, we have a shelter and a couple of food, lunch churches that do lunches and things like that. And a constituent pointed out to me, and I don't know if this is correct, I'm just repeating rumor right now, that 90% of the emergency calls in our city is to service homeless people. And I'm sure if that's not the exact right number, there's a number like that that's approximately correct.
Yeah.
And it's an exact example of what you mean. Like, that would not be a burden on 9/11 if we had healthcare. When we were at the dinner, the reception to the wedding we all attended, I had just gotten back from Iceland.
Yeah.
And you and I, three of us discussed it. But I'm going to say real quick, I was there for 8 days, but one night I got pretty ill, like violently ill. I went to the local hospital, and I was fine. Spoiler alert, I survived. But a doctor called it a likely GI virus. And so, I had both ends exploding with a pain level of 9. And after a couple hours, my wife was like, "You're going to the hospital." But at any rate, they put me in a room, private room, my own bed, nurses taking care of me, running tests, let me go in the morning because it had passed. I was a little dehydrated and weak, but, by the next day I was much, much better. On the way out, I think a doctor says to me, "Make sure you check out on the way out." Up till now, no one's even mentioned money to me. I think I did sign something, but I was still pretty sick. But no one went over your insurance or what things cost. They just signed me in. So I'm going out. I check in at the receptionist, and she tells me, "You're uninsured in Iceland. That means you have to pay the full amount, and I'll give you a receipt, and you can give it to your insurance back home, and they may reimburse you." And I said to her, "Well, no one told me this until now." And again, my American brain is running.
Yeah.
What do you think an overnight in a private room in a hospital would cost someone in America? And I said, "You tell me what it is, and I'll tell you what I can pay." And I don't know what number you're thinking, or people at home. It was $500 was the total cost. And I mean, that's not nothing. But I am uninsured in a foreign country. So I paid it, and I took the receipt. But, I was telling a friend of mine that after I got back, and he told me that he had to take his dog to the veterinarian, and it cost $8,000.
Yeah.
So
people call Uber instead of getting an ambulance because that's at least a few $1,000s just for the ride to get there.
Sure. Yep. Mine included an ambulance ride, by the way.
Wow.
Oh.
When I lived in New Zealand, I actually had a similar symptoms. I fainted at a party and was vomiting, and they took me straight to the hospital. And it was kind of the same thing, some kind of stomach bug that passed after a few hours. But I was living in New Zealand, so I was paying into their system. Nothing. I was not charged for anything. Overnight in an emergency room, tests. I didn't have a private room. I was like in the triage area that emergency rooms have, but I was still there overnight. And I can't. We have to have a separate episode of this podcast to discuss socialized medicine. I can't keep going. I see it excites John. It excites me.
Well, one of the things I'll say this before we're done with that, but the thing that's always just so telling to me, like this country, has probably some of the best propaganda. People talk about China and the Soviet Union, but we've been propagandized so hard that people don't even realize it. Like people talk when we bring up like socialized medicine, people act like it's an experiment. It's like, no, we're the experiment. Everyone has socialized medicine to the point to where it's not even called socialized medicine. It's called medicine. It's kind of the way like food is called organic if you don't put a shitload of chemicals in it, when it's like, well, maybe it should just be like that. And we just got to get used to maybe a few bumps on an apple or something like that. But yeah, the real experiment is letting a middleman come in here and literally price gouge people. And they were saying even that new diabetes drug, Ozempic, you could sell that for $5 and it could still be profitable. But they're like, no, what if we sold it for hundreds? It's sick, dude.
Martin Shkreli.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on socialized medicine before we move on? I want to ask at least one more topic before we wrap up, by the way.
I mean, I agree with all that. Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts except that I'm for it. And yeah, I agree with John with the whole middleman thing. And I've learned that over the years. And that's what it's so ironic. We're like, oh, what's wrong with this? And it's like, we're not even looking at our own flaws in our own systems, which are clearly a lot worse. And it's all capitalism related.
Yeah. The one thing I tell my friends and family is I lived for 10 years in Japan and New Zealand. Their systems weren't perfect, but they both have a form of, as John said, medicine. And there's one thing you can't explain to Americans, and that's walking around not worrying about your medicine.
Which has a great effect on your health, as it turns out, psychologically, and then in turn your physical, which is, Yeah,
my brother had 2 babies in the same calendar year, like 10 or 11 months apart.
Yeah. And
his insurance got used up on the first one. So he had this huge bill on the second one. And, it was upsetting, of course. So like people don't worry about that in Japan and New Zealand. They just have babies.
It's gross, man. And again, like study after study has shown like giving people paid time off when they have the baby, giving the men paid time, all of this stuff, it gives you more productivity to the companies. Yep. So we are so capitalistic that we are losing money because we'd rather get this money up front, or we're so beholden to these people who we told, hey, you can just game the system. It's sick, dude. That's the thing that I don't get about it. Because again, like the outcomes of the rich could even get more money if they wanted to. You can have a more productive society that's healthier. You know what I mean? But they're so used to gouging us the way that they are. And another thing, and then I'll leave this alone. I know everything's a nail to a hammer, but being black, I have come to see these incongruities. But when they were first trying to, they've tried to introduce socialized medicine here going back to like the Civil War. But one of the times that they did at the turn of the early 20th century, they outright said, you know what I mean? Like they didn't want black people to have it. You know what I mean? And it's so much stuff in this country that sucks because there's a certain amount of white people that would rather have this social Darwinism of we'll just let the cream of the crop of white people rise if we have to have these kind of stratified systems to make sure black people and other undesirable groups don't get into the in group. Because that's what a lot of this shit boils down to. And I'm not trying to be on some boogeyman.
There's a lot of like active and legacy Jim Crow shit and a lot of stuff that goes on in America. And in the Jim Crow period, the whites who ran things didn't care if it hurt some whites.
Look at Mississippi, dude. Look at me, like all these places that are suffering because they'd rather, like, we're not going to implement even the shitty healthcare thing that we got with the Obamacare, and or even like schools being funded by property tax. That's a modern day Jim Crow law.
Listen, let me ask you guys. I'm going to change the subject while we have some time, because I'm watching the clock for your sanity and also for the people at home sanity.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped in this.
No.
You're good.
This live stream will be turned into an episode of my podcast, and I can edit all that ranting out. No one wants to listen to that shit.
Cool.
But no, joking aside, we have mentioned a couple times, because it's related to all the other topics, the Supreme Court. But another thing in the news in the past week that's religion in the news is Alito being caught on tape. He's one of the Supreme Court justices, if you don't know.
Yeah.
Saying that he thinks America needs to be a more godly country. And he has, alliances with ultra-conservative groups, but actually getting sort of caught on tape admitting it. It was just, as one friend of mine said, we already knew that. It just proves what we already knew. So any thoughts about Alito or the Supreme Court?
Sure, Catholics are fucking weirdos.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like them. I actively hate religious.
They're fucking weirdos, and they're fucking weirdos.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just absurd. I don't know where to go with that. It's kind of right there,
Yeah. To a certain degree, it's a voting issue. About 10 years ago, I just became, when I vote for the Supreme Court. There's never going to be a perfect candidate. So who do you want appointing people to the Supreme Court? In this case, it's Joe Biden or DT. So and he got
the way Trump was able to put all those justices in, like, his legacy is going to be felt in this country probably to the end of this thing, like, burning out, because I don't see this ending well. But with Alito, again, everybody already kind of knew. One of the pushbacks I have when people say, like, we should pack the court and stuff like that, I don't think I think keep it at the number that it's at, but it should definitely be term limits, this whole lifetime appointee thing.
Right.
And they need some type of ethics. I mean, Clarence Thomas and Alito should be in jail, dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
If not put to fucking death.
Impeached and removed.
Yeah, like
Kavanaugh.
yes, like all of them, and on our side of it too, fucking Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a fucking bitch for not stepping the fuck down when she could have when Obama was in there.
Yep.
She was one of the liberal judges, but that's the problem I have in this country. Like, the Overton window is so far to the right that the liberals that we have in this country are centrist Republicans at best.
Oh yeah. Yes, that's something I learned traveling. At most European countries, including Australia, New Zealand, the conservatives are like our Democrats.
And our conservatives are just batshit crazy.
Dude. Yeah. They would be considered fascist by European political standards.
Yeah. And again, that's why they use the religion to kind of have some type of morality behind their shitty, crazy ideas. And then you throw in the blatant hypocrisy. I mean, a lot of these religious nuts are just closeted, self-hating gay people who try to and I'm not saying that as a pejorative to gay people. I'm saying
it's the hypocrisy.
Right.
The hypocrisy is like one of the big targets for satire, by the way. So
dude, it's so much projection. I hate black people, but I got this half black kid or this black fetish, or I hate gay people, but I'm gay, or I hate it, or I hate abortion, but my wife had an abortion. Every single time.
Donald Trump has had so many abortions. We don't even know how many.
Oh yeah.
And so I think
abortions could fund a small country if they
dude. I think one of the bigger problems, again, it goes to the propaganda and how the people, I mean, George Carlin had that joke. He was like, these politicians, they didn't come from the sky. They came from American schools, American families. Like, these are Americans. We have a lot of sickness in this country. And as much as I don't like Hillary Clinton, when she said half of those people are a basket of deplorables, I mean, they are. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you're in some way. It's kind of like the founding fathers. Like, yay, they were so smart and they were this and that. But you were a rapist and murdering slave owners. You know what I mean? Even if you didn't personally kill.
All the founding fathers are in hell.
Yeah,
they either had slaves or allowed slavery.
We're complicit in it. So,
and I am a fan of like the philosopher and founding father, both Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Brilliant minds, humanists. Franklin had slaves when he was a young business owner, and he hated it and spent the rest of his life fighting slavery. But Jefferson, as we know, was just a slave owner on his plantation.
Oh yeah, and then fucking him too, and then I'm going to release him when I die, and then he dies. And they're like, you know what? We'll just keep him because it'll keep the money going. And then denying Sally Hemings' family up until the 90s and all that shit. It's and again to the point of you can't blame it on it was this different time thing, because they were brilliant men who wrote about stuff and they knew what they were doing. You know what I mean? Yep. So if it's
yes, I mean they were debating slavery while they were doing the Constitution. Like when Columbus came to America on his second trip, which is where he set up a little post, like an actual post, he immediately enslaved the local indigenous people to build his buildings and things. And on his ship with him was his brother, who was a kind of friar or monk. And his brother told him, "You can't enslave those people; they're God's creatures." So the minute slavery came to North America, there was someone standing next to the person saying, "This is wrong."
Yeah. It's always been known like that. I think one of the things, again, my hammer nail thing, but I think one of the biggest things,
hammer that nail.
One of the biggest things in this country, besides my really anti-capitalist thing, with propaganda, the whole race thing that we do here, like, people really need to know that white and black does not exist.
Right.
And that when it comes, and again, that's what I mean. Like, people have been so propagandized in this country. That's why when you go to other countries and you ask, are you white? Are you black? It's a little more ambiguous.
Yeah. Oh, they got John. They got John. Oh no.
I'm gonna jump in with John before John gets back.
Yeah, do it, Steve.
Yeah,
I'm gonna wrap up soon.
We have full access to information explaining how race works, but nobody seems to care. And you could dispel all these myths. It's all, ever since we mapped the genome, we understand how race works, and it's not a thing. It's just phenotypical. It's just physical adaptations to an environment, and that's it. It's
and the thing about it that's really weird is, like, not just that, we're freakishly genetically close. Like no other animals are close like this. You know what I mean? So we're so, but for people to have been like just their whole identities are, I'm white, I'm black.
So I mean, I tried to explain to an overtly racist acquaintance of mine about the genetic side of it, and his reply was, "That's not true. They don't know that." Like,
God damn it! Just denialism.
Yes. Yep.
One thing I tell people is, if the most genetic difference that you have in humans is actually amongst sub-Saharan Africans, because everybody bottlenecked out of Africa. You can have a family in Europe, and you could take a family in Japan, and they could have more in common, the person in Europe and the person in Japan, than the actual two brothers in Europe, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? That's how freakishly close we are as a species. So my whole thing is, I know I'm not on some hippie shit to be like, hey man, like, you're gonna be seen as white, I'm gonna be seen as black, but it shouldn't be codified in the law no more than you should be writing on your job application, I'm bald or I'm tall. Imagine if that's how, like, the talls. Did you know talls are 27% more likely to commit a crime? Did you know that the balds are you know what I mean? Like, like, so that stuff will always be there. We'll always identify with what we can see, but the fact that it's so inherent on job applications and on credit scores, which credit is another racial thing that was made up. But like, because if it wasn't, then your credit would get better when you just saved your money and paid off shit. But it has nothing to do with that. But
take us home, John. We're going to wrap up in a minute.
I know. I'm sorry. I get on rant.
Okay.
You're good.
But
I invited you on here to rant. I'm loving this.
But yeah, that's one of my biggest things. If we could step away from that, because so many that book, What's the Matter with Kansas, how white people are just always convinced to vote against their best interests just so they can prop up that. And that's what, and even if you take race out of it, because I don't want to try to polarize people.
Right. Well, poverty is like an overlapping Venn diagram
issue. Right. Yeah. So this country is individualistic in the way that it's always sold on, you can be one of the people on top. You know what I mean? Right. So because black people, we feed into that too. You know what I mean? So if we could somehow get out of that, I think you could get some dominoes going. But until you can get people out of that, us, them, and
it's a blame cycle. They're homeless because they're deficient somehow, or they're poor because they have problems, whether it's genetic or social or crime. So you blame them instead of helping them. John said earlier, Steve said earlier that he just wished that kindness was a virtue, like that people would just be kind to each other. And I'll say, and I'll use this as a segue to wrap up. I've heard in my circles in politics, I'll just say more than once, so I don't exaggerate. Conservatives tell me when these issues come up, well, people die. You say, well, what can we do something about homelessness, about poverty, about healthcare? Yeah, people die. Why should I worry about me paying some?
It's the only time they believe in evolution, when it's a social Darwinism.
Yes.
Which is a tenet of fascism.
Yes. Hey, let's do a quick roundtable. Does anybody have anything interesting coming up? Any gigs or shows or merch that you want to mention? Steve, you go first.
Yeah, I'm featuring for Tim Wolf in Columbus next weekend.
Oh, sweet. We all love Tim Wolf, by the way.
Yeah.
What's do you know the venue? And also, who books that? I want to do it next.
It's for Nick DeLauey's hosting, and he's the one that organized it. And it's
shout out to Tim and Nick.
It's in Hilliard, but I can't remember the name of the bar. It's called The Station, I think.
I've hung out in Hilliard 2 or 3 times. That is a great area.
Yeah.
Great, okay, good. Have a good show. Break a leg. I love it. It's a college town. You'll be able to be edgy and do your political stuff.
Oh, good. Okay, thank God.
And like 10 coffee shops.
Thank Carl Sagan.
Yes. John, you got anything interesting coming up or anything merch you want to plug?
I got I'm doing that John Christ winery in Avon Lake this coming Friday.
John Christ, a Christ winery. That's hilarious.
Hey, yeah, we're turning water. I love that David Cross joke where he's like, he talks about him turning water in the wine, and he's like, can you imagine being at a wedding? Like, dude, we're in the desert. My kids are here. Who did this? Some of us want to drink, get some water without getting the buzz on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be this coming Friday, and then I got a few other things like www.johnarmstrongcomedy.
Yeah, both of you send me any links you want me to put in the description of the podcast version of this, and I'll make sure it's included. Sure. Any website or social media. I'm doing the Cove, which is in Geneva on the Lake, July 1st, so that's coming up. And then the first weekend of August, I'm featuring for Mike Conley at the Funny Stop. That's in Cuyahoga Falls. So those are some shows people can watch out for. And of course, John, Steve, and the 7 people listening at home, my book comes out in July. It's up here. It's my little logo. It's hard to read probably if you don't enlarge it. Religious Satire in the Era of New Atheism. It is kind of a Venn diagram of religious satire, September 11th, and the social movement of New Atheism and how they all sort of overlap and compare and reinforce each other. Okay. And the book version, it's hard copy. It's about $65. Not everybody wants to spend that on a book, but there's a Kindle version you can get for half that, like $25. Okay. So consider looking into that. And of course, you can always email me. We have email comicalheathen@gmail.com. We have a website that archives all our past episodes, including my interview with Louis Black and others. Our theme music is done by combination. My friend Mark Bell is playing the organ, and my friend Jeff Geddett remixed it. Here in this live stream, I don't bother playing it, but in the podcast, that music will lead in, or that music leads into the podcast and comes out of the podcast. Of course, any of our 12 regular listeners, thank you anyone who's watching now or listening to the podcast in the future. Really appreciate your support. And as a final thank you, I always end with this saying, it may be your dogma, but it's my karma, and I'm all about spreading the love. So thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dave, for calling in. And thank you for listening, everybody. So with that, we'll sign out. 3, 2, 1. See ya.
Thanks, guys.